Amen. All right. Goodbye, Aaron. We're so glad that you're here. So this week, I feel sad. Okay, this is the problem with helium. When it comes outside and it's cold outside, it gets a little wilty. So this is making me feel sad. Yes. Louise, what time are we peeling potatoes on Thursday? 6:30? That's even better, 6:30, and bring a potato peeler. I couldn't help it. She brings out my English ancestry. What can I say? Right, don't you want to just come and hang out and laugh and have fun? And bring a potato peeler. Yes. Now I'm sidetracked. That's okay. So this morning I want to talk about something that probably most of us have heard about that took place last Sunday evening on the Oscars. If you watched any media at all this week, it was on CBC, it was on CTV, it was on Global, it was on CNN, it's on every social media platform. It is everywhere. And see, I haven't even said what it is, and you all know what it is, right? So for those of you who have been somewhere else other than watching a screen, and may the Lord bless you, what happened this week was Chris Rock was hosting the Oscars, and Chris Rock is a comedian, and he made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith, about her being bald, and her husband, Will, got up, came up on stage, smacked him across the face, and then told him off verbally. And I've been thinking a lot about this all week long, and I'm realizing that they both made poor decisions. And it started with Chris Rock. And this is my little thing about teasing and making fun about people. If you have to make other people laugh by making fun of other people and putting them down, that's wrong. And so when we look at this situation, you're like, yeah, but he's paid to do it. He's paid to make people laugh. I said, you can make people laugh without putting other people down. As soon as we have to, make ourselves feel good, make money by putting other people down, by diminishing other people, that's wrong. And when we start thinking we have to do that to make people laugh, to make ourselves feel good, to puff up our own selves, then that's a poor decision. And I'm not saying that Will Smith made the right decision either. Jesus has stuff to say about how we deal with people who wrong us. But one poor decision led to another poor decision, and that's what I want to talk about this morning. We make 35,000 decisions every day. It's a lot. And it's overwhelming. It is overwhelming. And some are quite easy, well, it all depends on your perspective. Will I get out of bed this morning? Will I get out of bed? Will I flush the toilet? Will I brush my teeth? Will I have toast? Will I have butter on the toast? Or will I have peanut butter? Or will I have both? Some of them are quite simple and just happen all the time that we don't even realize that we're making those decisions. Some decisions are a little bit more troublesome, let me say. What am I going to do with my life? Is it time to sell the car and get the van? Is it, do I put gas in now, or do I wait to see if it goes down a couple more cents to see if I can, save some money? Other questions, is this the person I'm supposed to marry? How many kids, Lord, do you want us to have? Is this the house that you want us to live in? Is it time to move? How much should we get for this house? Lord, is this the town that you want us to live in? What school do you want me to go to? And some of these questions are so weighty, and I think I've told the story before. A young lady in my youth group came up to me. We just had a wonderful night of bowling. We were on the bus coming back to the church, and she's like, do you have a minute? I have a question I want to ask you. And I'm like, as long as it's a simple question, I'm ready. She's like, no problem. And she sat down and she said, what do you think I should do with my life? And I was like, that is so not a simple question. So she proceeded to tell me what God was stirring up in her own heart, and I sat and I listened and just helped her navigate through that a little bit. And interestingly enough, she is currently on a path to do that. But it just got me thinking, like, wow, some decisions are really easy and some aren't. Some actually cause a lot of trouble and concern, and we actually worry ourselves about decisions. And the problem with troublesome decisions or decisions that have a lot of weight, if we get stressed out on them, then we tend to take unnecessary risks and make poor choices. If we get anxious about them, then we actually back up and away from them, and we don't make the decision because we're afraid of making the wrong decision. I've been known to stand 20 minutes in front of the shampoo aisle, and I'm like, if I buy that one, it's going to make my hair frizzy. If I buy that one, it's going to make my hair flat. If I buy that one, I think my hair might fall out. And I literally stand there, and I kind of wait for somebody else to come up, and I sort of see what they're buying, and I look at I'm like, okay, I'll buy that one. Because I don't like making decisions. I probably falter on, I'm a late adapter. If you look at a bell curve of when people make decisions, there's lots of people who are early adapters who are always on the front edge of things. I'm so far on the last edge of things. The new season is coming around. I don't like making decisions because I am always very concerned about making the right decision. So I am on the anxious side of things. But Jesus said to his disciples who were feeling quite anxious about things, he says this statement in John chapter 14, which actually you've probably heard if you've been to a funeral. In fact, the day that my dad died, I needed a peace in my heart. And so I took my dad's Bible and I opened it up, and it opened it up to this passage from John 14. And it says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me." Or you believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going. Thomas, one of the disciples, said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" And Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and you have seen him." So the question is, well, why were his disciples troubled? Because that's how it starts off. 14:1 starts off with, "Do not let your hearts be troubled." So Jesus is looking at them, and their faces are troubled. They're murmuring amongst themselves, and he's speaking some truth in. So you have to go back into chapter 13. Well, what's taking place in chapter 13, actually, it's the Last Supper. Jesus has just washed his disciples' feet, and then he says, "One of you are going to betray me." And they're looking around. They're like, who? And you can feel the anxiety rise in the room. And Peter steps up and he is like, "Certainly, Lord, I'm not going to betray you." And Jesus looks straight at Peter and he's like, "Actually, you're not going to betray me. You're going to deny me 3 times. You're not going to hand me over to the people, but you're actually going to say you don't have any clue at all who I am. You're going to do it 3 times. And then he says to everyone, "I'm actually leaving. And I'm going to a place where you can't follow me." So you have to imagine the disciples who have followed Jesus for 3 years, hearing that one of them is going to betray them, one of them is going to deny Christ, and that Jesus is leaving and going somewhere, and they can't follow him. And so the anxiety and the fear and the troublesome thoughts are rising up. And Jesus, in his goodness, speaks his truth and says, "Don't let your hearts be troubled." I don't want you to worry about this. I know crazy things are going to happen, but there's no reason for you to be troubled. And I'm going to tell you why. And I just love that that in the midst of the troubling thoughts, Jesus speaks this phrase that shows up at every single funeral that I have attended, that says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust also in me. In my Father's house there are many rooms, and if it weren't so, would I have told you? But I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I'm going to come back and take you, and you know the way." And Thomas is like, "I don't." And Jesus says, "Well, actually, I am the way, the truth, and the life." And so Jesus is reminding them that they need actually to depend on him for what's happening, to depend on his strength and his guidance and his leadership, because they immediately started thinking, what are we going to do? And isn't that what we do when troublesome times come, when decisions come up and we don't know what to do? Like we start just like, what am I going to do? What are we going to do? And we start listing our assets and what we can be doing and how we're going to manipulate and control, and we start doing the blame game. Well, it's your fault and you're doing it, and no, it's your fault and this is why it's happened. And it's like, whoa. Jesus is like, don't be troubled. Don't go there. Like focus on me, he says. I am the way. Don't rely on your own wisdom. Don't rely on your own list of assets. Like, I want you to lean into me as the way, the truth, and the life. And so when Thomas says, we don't know where you're going, Jesus actually lines up these three phrases to help them when the troublesome times come. These three phrases: the way, the truth, and the life. And so what's interesting is the definite article that's at the front of every single one of those words: the, or the way. So there is no other way. There is no other truth. There is no other life. So what does that mean? Well, Acts 4:12 actually says there's no other way that we can be saved except through Jesus. And if you were to look at all of the world religions and actually analyzed what salvation is, it all has to do with on how good a person is. That's a lot to handle. If you go to Buddhism, it's about getting rid of all your desires so you don't fall into temptation. And you know what's interesting? Jesus says, I will actually give you the desires of your heart. Desires are good. In Hindu, it's like you have to overcome evil. You are responsible for overcoming evil. Well, that's a little bit too much than I can handle, because I look at the evil in the world and I'm like, there's no way I myself can overcome evil. We look at Islam, and it's like, as long as you perform the 5 pillars: fasting, prayer, giving alms, pilgrimage, and acknowledging Muhammad as the prophet, as long as you do that all the time, then you're good. And I kept looking at these different religions, and I thought, the pressure on me for my own salvation is too great. Always wondering, like, am I good? Am I good enough? And the thing about Jesus is he said, you just come. I'm going to look after your salvation. The book of Ephesians says it is by grace you've been saved, by faith, not by works, so none should boast. Has nothing to do with who we are or how good we are, or did we measure up today? Did we give enough today? Did we say enough kind words today? Did we overcome evil well enough today? No, Jesus is all about grace and mercy, and in my strength, you can do everything. I love that. I love the fact that it doesn't depend on us, which is why he says, I am the way. He also says, I am the truth. And with this statement, Jesus is answering the question, well, can you trust me? Because isn't that one of the biggest questions people ask? Can I actually trust me? Can you actually trust Jesus? Is what he says true? And you gotta look at who Jesus is, because if you look at as I was looking at these different religions in the world, they all say Jesus is a good man, a good teacher, a good prophet. Well, it would tell me then a good something wouldn't lie. But none of them would say that Jesus is God. None of them would say that he is the only way to salvation, and yet Jesus did. He said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. And in this very statement, he says, no one comes to the Father except through me. And so you're like, if he's saying that, how do we know that what he's saying is true? Okay, well, let's look at who he is. Did he do it, is what he was saying for power and money and prestige? No. Because really, his sandals wore out everywhere he went. He only had one pair. To pay his taxes, he actually had to go fishing, and they just happened to catch a fish that had a gold coin that would pay for their taxes. At the end of his life, he had one robe, and it was actually gambled. When people started following him, he said, you need to be willing to give up everything because I have nowhere to lay my head. Like, Jesus had nothing, so it certainly wasn't because he was going to get lots of money. Well, then you're like, well, then did he just say crazy things? Was he a crazy person? Well, most people who said what Jesus said aren't crazy. Like, he said things that totally tripped up the religious scholars of the day when he said, turn the other cheek. When he said, forgive others as I have forgiven you. When he said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. Like, so many times the religious smarty pants couldn't outsmart him. So he certainly wasn't crazy, and he didn't act crazy because his demeanor was the same all throughout Scripture. So he wasn't into power, and he certainly wasn't crazy. So then that tells me that he really was sane, and what he was saying was true. So when he says he is the truth, and he says, I am God, then I have to believe that what he is saying is true. And that brings me peace. So when we understand that Jesus gives the way only through him, that brings me peace. It's not about me and what I can do. When I can believe what he says, then I don't have to think that he's lying. That when he says it, it's actually going to happen. That brings me peace. And then he says, I am the life. So he says, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life. And that's why Jesus comes. He comes to give us life and life to the full. We talked about that last week as the Good Shepherd. He came to give us this full life. And it says, those who have the Son have life. Those who don't have the Son don't have life. And we have to be reminded of who Jesus is and what he offered. And that's where Thomas was at. Thomas and the disciples, it's like they had forgotten who Jesus was and what he was offering. This full life. And so when we find ourselves being troubled and facing tough decisions, we need to ask ourselves, what is it that we believe? Because our actions come out of our belief systems. So the problem isn't Jesus. The problem is us. We're rebellious. We like doing things our own way. And so when Jesus says, come follow me, we can see that as very restrictive. And we certainly don't want to be offensive to people and say, well, no, because you haven't confessed Christ as Lord and Savior, then you can't be with God. You won't be in heaven. We see that as restrictive. And yet, Jesus isn't restrictive. And had there been any other way, Jesus would have taken it. Because we're told in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before he was crucified, he actually cried out to the Father with sweat drops of blood. And he said, Lord, if it's possible to take this cup from me, take it. But your will be done. So if there was any other way possible for us to be saved, Jesus certainly would have taken it because he asked. He asked. And in that moment, he took the cup and he walked the road to Calvary and he was crucified to take the payment for our sin. He is the only way. There is no other world religion that their God laid down their life for the people that they love. And so when I say Jesus is not restrictive, he invites everyone to come. He said, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes, they'll never hungry and they'll never be thirsty. I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness. It's not restrictive. We just don't like the follow part. We like the offer. We just don't like the follow. Because we see it as restrictive, but I see it, and as I've been thinking more and more about it, when I think about what Christ offers us, a fulfilled, complete life. Like last week, we talked about the door. You will come in and out and experience green pasture. What does that mean? You have safety, security, provision, and health. The Lord's going to look after everything that we need. Like Jesus offers everything. We're the ones that make it restrictive or make it seem restrictive. So, how do we respond to this? Well, what's interesting is what Jesus also did in chapter 13. So, as he's talking about all these troubling things that are going to happen, the betrayal, the denial that he's leaving them, he's serving people. He's washing the disciples' feet because it needed to be done. And then he gives them a new command. It says, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, you must love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. And so in the midst of the troublesome times, what is Jesus doing? He's loving and he's serving. So that tells me that in order to make decisions in troubled times, when I'm feeling anxious or unsure, I need to ask myself the first question. Well, have I acknowledged Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life? Do I believe that he really is the only way? Do I really believe that what he says is true and that he offers a life that no one can offer? Do I believe that? Secondly, is the decision I'm about to make showing love to others? Is it? Or does it have a twinge of selfishness? Is it more beneficial to me than it is to the other person? And the third question is, am I serving in the choice that I'm making? Is the choice that I'm making actually going to serve people? Because that's what Jesus was doing. In the midst of that troublesome time, he was giving this truth. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. That is how we make decisions. When we actually surrender our rebelliousness, our selfishness, our fears, our insecurities, and acknowledge Jesus as the only way, receive him as the source of truth, and walk in the life he has given to us, then we experience the fullness of life, and then we love and serve others. The decisions that we make will take on a totally different light. And I love what Jesus does, because he tells them, I'm the way, the truth, and life. And then as you read on a little bit more in chapter 14, he says, I'm going to send you the Spirit of truth to help you make all those decisions. I just love who Jesus is. And so as the worship team comes up, the question I find myself is, do I have to make a decision? Are there decisions that I have to make that seem troublesome to me? First, have I acknowledged Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life in that decision? Well, first of all, in my heart, have I done that? And maybe that's a decision you have to make for yourself today. Maybe you've never made Jesus the way, the truth, and the life in your heart, and you need to make that decision today. Acknowledge that he is the only way, that he is the only source of truth, and that he is the life. And you're tired of rebelling. You're tired of being selfish, and you want to experience everything that he has. Then I invite you to answer that question. I'm going to do that today, and maybe you're going to be a red balloon. There you go. I'll stand here because it's so sad. Unless I'm out of the shot, I'm so sorry. But have you acknowledged Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life? And then in those decisions, are you willing to actually say, Lord, is this a decision that's going to help me to love others and to show people who you are? And then thirdly, am I actually serving people? When I think back to the decision that Chris Rock made to poke fun at Jada Pinkett Smith. He made a poor decision. It wasn't one based in love, and it certainly wasn't based on serving someone, but it was for his own need to make sure people were laughing. And we can say the same thing about Will Smith. It wasn't loving, and it wasn't kind and thoughtful, and it didn't really serve anything. And you might say, yeah, but he defended his wife, and I'm going to say, I bet you there's other ways of defending your wife other than violence. But those are the choices that we make. And Jesus is so gracious. He's like, you know what? When you're feeling troubled, don't worry. I have overcome the world, and you can experience the peace that I have to offer if you acknowledge me as the way, the truth, and the life. And so we're going to sing. And if you have a decision that you've been trying to make and you want to just surrender it to the Lord, I encourage you to come up and make use of the prayer rails. This is a wonderful place to give things to the Lord, because then he comes and he takes them. So I encourage you to do that. If you haven't made Jesus the way, the truth, and the life in your own life, I encourage you to do that today too. But whatever your need is, he's going to meet you. He says, I have overcome the world. So I want to encourage you today as we sing, if you need to come forward, come forward. If you need to close your eyes, if you need to bow at your chairs, spend this time with the Lord and asking him these things and giving these things over to him so that you can experience peace in your decisions. Let's sing.
Stand with me, please.